When you think of Doom WAD music, what's the first genre that comes to mind? Much of it is built around rock, metal, and orchestral sounds, but how often do you hear the influence of, say, hip-hop and R&B? Although it wasn't the first to do so, the soundtrack to 2022's Not Even Remotely Fair undoubtedly popularized a more ethereal, synth-heavy sound, with a particularly early tune standing out. This is Fireblu Baptism by MegaSphere. Hey there everybody, and welcome to another installment of Within the MIDI. This is a series of deep dives we do on the channel into individual Doom WAD MIDIs to figure out what makes them sound so great, from the instruments they use to the music theory that went into making them. In today's episode, we'll be exploring Fireblu Baptism, written by Peter Lawrence, aka MegaSphere, for Not Even Remotely Fair, which was released in 2022. Not Even Remotely Fair is a different kind of MegaWAD because its entire premise and gameplay are set up around the Nightmare difficulty, which is a difficulty, so often regarded as a joke or extraneous or way too hard to play on, but every level in this MegaWAD is made quite accessibly around the difficulty to account for all the changes in-game that occur from playing on it. This track we're listening to today, Fireblu Baptism, accompanies map 3 of the MegaWAD, which shares the same name, and it's part of the first episode, which is titled Broaden One's Horizons, which leans into that whole idea of trying something new, heading into uncharted waters, and playing a WAD centered around a difficulty you may not be familiar with or have never played before. The entire soundtrack of Not Even Remotely Fair shares that same kind of idea in the sense that it treads into genres that you don't normally hear in Doom music. Hip-hop, R&B, electronic, dance hall kind of music. Again, stuff you wouldn't normally expect to hear in a Doom WAD, but yet fits so well with all of the level designs. Another really cool thing about this track in particular is that Peter has an entire video on his YouTube channel detailing how he went about making this track, with his own commentary and thought process behind all the instruments, the chords, the whole composing process. So I'd really encourage you to go check that video out. You can find a link to it in the description below. As for the track itself, here we're in the key of G minor, we're in 4/4 time. It's at a steady 120 beats per minute, kind of a moderate tempo, but it actually feels a lot faster than that, which I attribute a lot of that to the drums, which we'll get to in just a minute. You can kind of break this track up into 3 overarching sections. The first one is dominated by ocarina and guitar solos, and then the second one by an electric grand piano and brightness sounds, and with the third and final section being an ocarina reprise. That's a major oversimplification, though. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and so with that, let's just go ahead and check everything out. We will start, of course, right from the beginning, naturally, so here we go. Very light sounding, almost relaxed. Alright, so I'm going to stop it there just for a brief moment here, and I want to talk about a couple things here, mostly just the overall sound. Again, it's a very light sounding piece, not really a ton of bass in there. Again, very relaxing. It's a nice juxtaposition to all of the crazy action happening in game, while you're playing on Nightmare. So the first thing I want to explore is the drums, because a lot of that distinct sound is accomplished through the drum kit here. So let's have just a listen to those. Nice. Love the snare hits there. Those are really cool. And I'm really just briefly gonna fast forward here to the very end, because I want you to hear the last little bit here of the drums. You hear that Kuika in there. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, it's very there's a lot of percussive sounds. There's no traditional sounding like kind of like rock kits in here. It's all very much electronic sounding. And that actually can be accessed if we take a look at the inner workings here. You can actually access the sort of like the electronic drum kit if you go into, if we look at, say, drums. Yeah, this is where he got it from. At least this is as far as I know how you can do it on here. You can hear here, each instrument setting has kind of its own drum kit sound. So there's a lot of let me see if I can. Yeah, like different sounding snares and things you can play around with. So it's all yeah. So the way he got the electronic kit, he's using the steel acoustic guitar setting here for at least for the drum track. Now, as for the bass, I know I just got done talking about how it's like a much lighter sounding piece, not very bass heavy. The bass is actually split up between two tracks. It's split up between a low pitched ocarina and the voice, like the vocal ooh sound, which sounds like this put together here. So what we've got here is that it's a very low pitched sound. Again, it sounds like that sound that you hear at the beginning of the Bobby Prince track Doom that plays on, I think, maps like 5 and 13, if I'm remembering correctly, in Doom 2. So that's what's going on here. You've got a low pitched voice, and then the ocarina, which is actually barely audible, plays that exact same part just an octave lower. That's basically what holds down the bass here is those two sounds. And again, the bass isn't really the central focus of the piece. There's a lot more going on in addition to this. Next part I want to highlight is the ocarina solo, which is just so cool. So here it is. So cool. So it's really again really light, very airy, and what we just heard there is actually two tracks. It's the ocarina track plus a copied track, and again like kind of shifted over to add a kind of like echo delay kind of sound in there. So it's really like what it just sounds like on its own is like this. Yeah, so if you just solo one of the tracks, the echo's not there. But it's made up a lot of these very like short 16th notes. And you'll notice as you listen to the solo and as it kind of progresses more and more, in the first half, you can see here, the notes like in each measure, you've got a note that starts on the first beat, and here's another one here. And then as you kind of move into the second half, the rhythm sort of changes up a little bit with notes coming in slightly more delayed in the ocarina solo track here. So it's a nice way of sort of changing things up and making sure it doesn't really get too monotonous, even though there are like chord changes there. Speaking of chords, those are enunciated in this section through the electric grand piano and the tremolo strings, and you also have bursts from the orchestra hit, the string ensemble instruments, and an electric jazz guitar playing continuous 16th notes, arpeggios, I believe, climbing in pitch with each chord change. So that all sounds like this. This is during the ocarina solo. So what we've got here during the first ocarina solo, these are our chords. We start off with G minor 7, G, B flat, D, and F. So that's our first chord. Then we move to E flat major 7th second inversion. So that looks like B flat, D, E flat, G. Our third chord is D minor 7 third inversion, so that's C, D, F, A. Now, interesting little thing here is that while we've got this D minor 7 on the piano, the tremolo strings are playing something a little bit different. Those are playing a D suspended 4 chord, which sounds like this. And that's made up of G, A, and this high-pitched D note here. So that's all going on there, and that's playing on top of the D minor 7 chord again. And moving on from that part, we have C minor 7, so C, E flat, G, B flat, going on there. And then again, just like with the other chord there, we've got jazz guitar, the electric jazz guitar, playing this E flat major. We've got that arpeggio being played on top of the C minor 7. So if we put all of that together, here's what those chords sound like in sequence. And that last one, I actually left that one out. That is an F7 second inversion, which consists, well, it looks like C, E flat, F, and A. And that carries us over into the next part, which is this really cool part here with this square lead coming in. Playing like a lot of these like 30-second notes together in the last of the ocarina solo. Then this guitar solo is so good. I want to highlight that because it sounds like it's 2 tracks, but it's just one. I love that because the way he did it here, if you look here at the sort of the sheet music, is that we've got, I think the way he like pulled off that echo without using another guitar track is he actually kind of like spaced the notes out and like lowered the volumes of each one and tied a lot of them together, as you can see here, which really helps them helps like each note kind of linger like beyond when the next one starts, if that makes sense. So it sounds like a lot more like echoey, a lot more, the notes sound a lot more drawn out that way, which is a really cool effect. This brings us to the middle section, which starts off with a heavy electric grand piano solo with a lot of sustained notes. Listen to this. All like really just flows together. You can hear the strings kind of come in. Kind of hear the strings come in a little bit there. Let's hear just those real quick. Yep, and those kind of like complement the piano and like help move the piece along with like each chord change. And those chords are pretty much the same as the ocarina solo, the G minor to E flat to D minor to C minor, and F7, kind of bringing us back into the next part. But I just want to go back to that piano there. Let's actually do a quick look behind the curtain here and pull up the effects menu here, because I think what we've got, if we come to, I don't think it would be, yeah, here it is. This is how he is able to stretch all of those notes together to where none of them sound short and detached. He's basically just maxed out the sustain effect here during this whole part. This whole second section on the whole is generally pretty quiet. It's still very relaxing, but there's not as many instruments in the mix here. And it gets even quieter with... Yeah, we actually have a slightly modified version of the guitar solo just from a little bit before. It's not quite the exact same solo, but it's close. Yeah, so like... Yeah, there's like a few changes in there. Again, it's not exactly the same. Moving on to our last section, we have a final ocarina reprise that sounds a lot more tense than before. And that's when it loops back around to the beginning. So, again, this ocarina solo, this is a lot more... This one doesn't feel as relaxed. This is quite a bit further from like the more relaxed tone this piece took on at the very beginning. I think it has a lot to do with kind of the progression of the map and the way the action sort of escalates the further you progress through it. I think what contributes the most to that buildup of tension is this. The dramatic hits from the orchestra and the bass ocarina and bass vocal sound. Before, again, we have that kind of release of all the tension at the beginning again, all of these, these three low-pitched tracks play in unison, and they give us kind of a new chord arrangement, going from G minor to E flat to F. So, I actually got kind of curious here as I was listening to this. What if we were to change here all of the A naturals to A flat, just to kind of give it a more Phrygian kind of feel to it? Let's see what that... You know, bizarrely, I don't like that as much. I'm glad it's not written that way, because I think the feeling I always get from playing the map is that yes, there's a lot of action going on, but nothing is wildly out of the player's control. So I think the fact that he went with A natural instead of A flat there was a much better way to go than to have this darker feel to it that just doesn't suit the relaxing tone at all. It would make the transition back to the beginning, I think a lot more uncomfortable that way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Fireblu Baptism by MegaSphere. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Within the MIDI, and I really encourage you to check out Not Even Remotely Fair. It is a fantastic megawad. Even if you've had no experience with the Nightmare difficulty before, it does a really good job of easing the player into the difficulty and kind of getting them familiar with sort of the gimmicks that you can, play around with on Nightmare and just have fun with it on top of that. I'd also be remiss if I didn't tell you, if you want to get the entire Not Even Remotely Fair soundtrack, it's available for download on MegaSphere's Bandcamp page, which I'll link in the description below, and just check out more of MegaSphere's work in general. If you're not familiar, he created the Master Levels MIDI pack, he spearheaded the No Rest for the Living MIDI pack, and has made contributions to Mid the Way It Did and the Ultimate MIDI pack. The guy's been involved in so many different community projects. It's crazy how much quality work he's put out in just the last few years. So let me know your thoughts on this track. What were your favorite parts, and what tracks do you want to hear in this series next for us to do deep dives on? Let me know in a comment below, and until the next video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.